Welcome, everybody. This is the Women in Criminal Justice Task Force. We are here for the breakout presentation on the untold stories, takeaways from the listening session. And I just want to do a quick introduction. Here is our quick slideshow, and I'm just going to introduce who we are, but I'm going to move through the slideshow real quick with picture. We have several panelists joining us. And I'm going to go by introduction in terms of their order. We have Tina Longo, who is the co-chair of the Women in Task Force, and she is the attorney at large of the Criminal Practice Legal Aid Society with almost 30 years commitment to nonprofits that advocate and litigate for social justice. She's engaged in work that helps clients and communities in New York City and across the nation. And her full bio is on the website. She began her career at the Legal Aid Society in 2002 as a staff attorney. In 2007, they were promoted to supervising attorney in the same office, where they continued to directly represent clients as well as train and manage a team of attorneys, paralegals, and investigators. During that time, they served as a member of the interdisciplinary task force at Legal Aid that worked closely with Davis Polk LLP to develop and analyze that ultimately led to groundbreaking case cap legislation. And in May 2011, Tina was hired as deputy attorney in charge of the criminal defense practice, where they were responsible, along with the practice attorney in charge, for the daily operations of the practice's over 1,200 dedicated staff representing over 236,000 indigent New Yorkers. She is co-chair of the American Bar Association Women in Criminal Justice Task Force. Tina is. They are an advisor to the ABA Criminal Justice Section Council, a member of the Board of Directors of Chief Defender Association New York, and National Legal Aid and Defender Association, with a steering committee member of the National Association of Public Defense. We also have Professor Barbara Creel, who is a tenured law professor at the University of New Mexico School of Law, former director of the Southwest Indian Law Clinic. Professor Creel currently directs an Innocence and Justice project at the law school. She teaches criminal law and criminal procedure, evidence, as well as seminar courses in criminal law in Indian country and Native American Indian civil rights, courses of her own design and of the first for the kind to be offered in the nation. It should be noted that Professor Creel is a recognized expert in the right to counsel in Indian country and frequent speaker on equal justice for Native Americans in the criminal justice system. She is a member of our task force and serves on the ABA Criminal Justice Section on Tribal Lands Committee, currently writing on Native American sentencing disparities and equal protection. We also have I'm just doing a quick highlights from their bios. We also have Gloria Mitchell, an attorney recently served on the City of Spokane's Mayor's Cabinet as Director of Local Government and Multicultural Affairs for the City of Spokane for 6 years. In her current role with the City of Spokane, the focus of her work has been on criminal justice reform initiatives. She currently serves as an adjunct professor at Gonzaga University School of Law and Whitworth University. We also have Professor Sara Redfield, who is Professor Emerita at the University of New Hampshire School of Law. She's a member of the Maine Bar. Educational law is her primary practice and teaching area. Her research and scholarships are focused on inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, IDEA, in the legal profession and along the education pipeline. She has decades of experience presenting and training judges, lawyers, and educators from all areas of practice in all parts of the country on IDEA issues. Most recently, her work has included work with NGOs interested in improving their diversity and equity profile. Her current work concentrates on implicit bias and strategies to interrupt that bias and reduce the negative consequences of its manifestations in legal, medical, educational, workplace environments. We also have the Honorable Denise Langford Morris from Oakland County Circuit Court. Judge Denise Langford Morris is the first African-American circuit court judge and first female dean of the bench, which was established in 1848. She is a former assistant Oakland County prosecutor, assistant United States attorney, civil division, and private practice insurance and municipal defense. She's presided over felony criminal and general civil cases for over 25 years in the county of approximately 1.2 million people with a AAA bond rating. She's the first African-American woman nominated by any party to run statewide for the Michigan Supreme Court, and is the first African-American to ever win a countrywide race. She has an extensive bio, very involved in the American Bar Association, Director of National Conferences of State Trial Judges, the ABA American Jury Commission, co-section manager of the Criminal Justice Section, Equal Justice Division, ABA Africa Council Rule of Law Initiative member, the Women's Task Force, and additional committees. We also have Professor Maryam Ahranjani. I screwed that up when I wanted to do it right. Selected for the 2019-2020 New Faculty of the Year at the University of New Mexico. She is teaching or has taught criminal law, constitutional rights, criminal procedure, educational policy, and criminal sentencing. She serves as faculty advisor to the Marshall Brennan Constitutional Literacy Project and Immigration Law Student Association. Prior to joining the faculty in 2016, she has served as international legal consultant in Guatemala City. There is more extensive information to read about this esteemed professor from New Mexico, but most likely we will see her again on Friday, where she receives the Reader Taslitz Award, RAEDER-TASLITZ. So I wanted to do that right. So that is our panel, along with myself. I'll be moderating, and I think we just want to jump right in now to this. I'll stop sharing my window, and we'll begin. If we could begin, please, with Tina Longo, please.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Judge. And hi, task force members. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. So I'm Tina Longo, and I have the honor of co-chairing the task force along with Professor Carla LaRoche. And I wanted to just sort of set the objectives and goals, and then hand it over to our members. When Carla and I were asked to co-chair this really important task force, this was a few years ago under the then chair, Professor Dervain, who the ABA, big ABA, had in fact been looking at women in the legal system, but it was really critically important for us to take a sort of a focused view on particularly women in the criminal legal system, those of us across the spectrum, from the bench to prosecutors to public interest to the academics to government, that were playing a supportive role and a stakeholder role. And more importantly, to really look at sort of what are the specific challenges women have in the criminal legal profession, why the data was showing that while in fact we were the majority of people coming out of law school, women were getting into this work, we were also moving at astronomical rates. And it was really important for us to be very intentional with how we were going to do this task force. We knew that in order to understand what was going on, we had to bring a task force together that was very intentional in identifying women of diverse lived experience, diverse roles they play, diverse backgrounds, race, identities, and views. And so here we are. We have this fantastic task force, some of the members you will be meeting and hearing from today. The other thing we wanted to do and knew we needed to do differently was to go to places and listen to women in ways we hadn't perhaps done enough of before. And so we were intentional as a group to go out physically, traveling to many jurisdictions across the country and held listening sessions. And Maryam will sort of develop this perhaps more, but listening sessions, listening to many dozens of women who were in our work and listening to those challenges. And the goal here, right? The goal here is to stay connected, particularly at a time right now when everybody's remote, to bring people together and keep them proximate to help sort of face the challenges, uplift the work, uplift the spirit of women in our profession, support the coming generations of law students, and increase and keep the membership of our section. And hope that this model for this task force is one that will continue to grow, and we are very fortunate to have the strong support of our former chair, Kim Parker, our current chair, April Fraser-Kamara, and our incoming chair, and hopefully the chairs in the future. So with that, Judge, I'm going to turn it back to you because I think most important is hearing from our task force members about what they've experienced, what they've heard, and then to obviously open up for questions and answers. But thank you all for joining us. It has been indeed an unbelievable experience to hear and listen. And I want to say this task force has also been the greatest of friends. And we've built relationships within our group as well as across the country. So thank you. Judge, you might be on mute. Judge Pickering, you might be muted.
Just to let you know, I will be one of many doing that today, talking on mute. Right. So if we could hear from Professor Barbara Creel now. So one of our first locations was in Albuquerque. She's going to talk about the setup at Albuquerque and then her own takeaways. Professor Creel, please.
Yes. Thank you, Judge. First of all, I want to thank you, the listeners who are here today, and fellow task force members. Wherever you are, I hope you're safe and well, and I hope your families are the same, safe and well. I know that this pandemic has impacted different communities differently, and we don't all have the same resources and resilience. I also wanted to acknowledge that wherever you are on Indian land, the land of our ancestral people, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk about the task force. I want to thank Tina and Carla for their leadership in the task force on women in criminal justice, and especially thank and congratulate Professor Ahranjani, who invited me, a colleague on the UNM faculty who invited me to be on the task force. It is truly an honor and a privilege to be working with this wonderful group of women. And we do have such a great story of friendship, of coming together. When Professor Ahranjani came to me as the reporter of the group, we were talking about the best ways to introduce the panel to New Mexico and New Mexico to the group. And we thought it would be really important to curate a list of people that we wanted and also invite all comers. And so we had a particular idea of looking at the rural nature of New Mexico and the Southwest. And we really wanted to be in closer to tribal lands. We ended up in Albuquerque as the hub of many places in New Mexico, and invited people who were women who were working in Indian country, on the reservation, off the reservation, and in rural New Mexico, in southern and northern New Mexico. The rurality issue was really important and one that reverberated throughout our work. The idea that there is an urban practice of criminal justice and women's role in that, and also that there is a rural practice of criminal justice, and the women leaders who were often taking ownership of those issues. We had invited the Chief Defender of the Navajo Nation Public Defense Office, who testified about specific issues related to tribal sovereignty and defense, but also was really, it was important to hear from her in several aspects. One was the isolation that she felt, but also the camaraderie and the solidarity that the issues were the same for her as a woman, either in her office or in the courtroom or with her defendants. The facts were different. The specific tensions were related to the overall issues. My takeaway from this was that there is a recipe for support of women, whether they're in rural Indian country or in urban settings. There's also some women who needed different types of support. And one of the takeaways that I saw was that as a woman who had a traditional support system outside of the office, and by traditional I mean the nuclear family relationships of having a partner who was fully employed and had support systems for caregiving in and outside the home, did much better than women who had a different support system, either a community support system or having less resources for the home. And so what I mean by that is someone who had a partner who was employed and they supported them financially. They could afford childcare, they could afford lower paying jobs, and they could afford to leave when these issues became too tough. Those women who were just as committed to the issues but had more flexibility. Women who are committed to the solidarity of the defense mission had much more difficulty in staying when they didn't have that type of financial support. The jobs weren't paying enough, and they were in a rural area where there wasn't enough training and support to get them through some of these dark tensions. So there was a direct relationship between the work of criminal justice and the financial support and the family structure or the support system, or how resourced their offices were to be able to provide the type of support that was needed to bring these excellent defenders into the type of environment that, frankly, they deserve and we all deserve in pursuing justice. I'll have more to say about particular people and issues that I saw. But again, I want to thank you for being here, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Professor Creel. We will then move on to Gloria Mitchell, who's in Spokane. Gloria?
Good afternoon. What I found really fascinating was visiting the different sites. It really did make a difference geographically where people lived. in Spokane, Washington, we're the second largest city in the state of Washington, next to Seattle, but our communities could not be more different. The Spokane County area generally does not elect a Republican countywide candidate for almost, I think we have one Democrat for the entire county that is in office. Just a very different way of doing things and advocating. One of the things that was really impactful for me was, sometimes when you're in a toxic soup, you don't know you're in it. And having the opportunity to visit, for example, San Francisco, where there was a lot more, I'm going to say, progressive views on acceptance of, just more acceptance of people culturally, really did make a difference on how women were able to advocate for themselves also in the workforce. It kind of it interrelated. One of the things that came up a lot, not just in Spokane, but across the different listening sessions, was advancement, women advancing in their career path. And one of the biggest themes that came coming up was there's a certain pathway of how someone, for example, starts off as starting a deputy prosecutor and then advances to be able to do capital cases. There's a pathway to being able to get those type of assignments. And when we were finding those women relaying stories that they had male supervisors, sometimes even female supervisors, that didn't feel that certain types of cases were right for women to be working on. So if there were violent offenses or offenses involving serious crimes, that it just wasn't right for them to be doing those. It wasn't for ladies or for women to be doing those type of cases. Another resounding theme that we heard across all the different listening sessions was the role motherhood really plays. The choice of being a mother plays in the career path of women, and specifically when you're doing litigation, if you're in the public defender or the prosecutorial role, that's very trial intensive, with lots of deadlines and not a lot of flexibility. If you're going to be assigned to a big case, planning around how you're going to do your family planning, which is something that most men don't have to face, and making those very intentional decisions on whether they have children earlier in their career and forego some of those opportunities to set themselves up for advancement in the future, or they hold off to try to get to a certain point before they do that, and then how do they re-enter? And that we found that was a big challenge, that women that choose to be mothers, whether they give birth or they adopt, it's still it's a huge change in lifestyle and commitment that you have to your job. How that was really impactful, and how the women that did succeed or had more opportunity to succeed were those that had supervisors that really understood the importance of accommodation, and that it didn't mean that they were less qualified or less competent, but that actually that support made them better attorneys and really put them on that track to advancement. A big deal, because what we find a lot is, I think we all know, the criminal justice system is very male dominated. So there's a lot of male leadership. Specifically around electives, the prosecutors are predominantly white males that work in these areas. That support of having a male ally or a male champion that would really go out of their way to give opportunities for experience to incoming attorneys, and even as they're like mid-level, making sure that they were inclusive and that they supported them, and that they had a plan of how they were going to work together on giving those opportunities for assignments that would lead to promotion and advancement, if that's what a prosecutor or a public defender was interested in doing, or someone seeking elected office or a judgeship. There really is a really big difference in, I think what we found in where you live. There were some limitations. For example, some of the women shared in when we were in Tallahassee, although there is a lot of specifically the Black community, there's a lot of presence there. You don't see it in leadership. You don't see it in the system. Some of these like historical, systemic, institutional racism, how that impacts who's representing the community in the justice system as well. Who has those opportunities for advancement, going to law school and supporting, women being part of the criminal justice system. So I'm just going to pose my overall takeaway from the listening sessions, and I'll be happy to follow up on anything that comes up as we continue our discussion.
Thank you, Gloria. Just to let everybody know, if everyone on the panel can mute yourself until you're ready to speak and have your camera on. So thank you. We're getting some background noise, and we're trying to figure out where it came from. So thank you. what Gloria just said and what Barbara said, and goes back to the thoughts of that Tina started us with. That's a lot to unpack just right there. But we're going to continue on because there's a certain theme that we keep on hearing as we go through these listening sessions. Next up, we have Professor Sara Redfield. And Ms. Redfield, we are very good on time. So fire away, please.
So thank you, Judge. So I too have to start, as did my colleagues, thanking both Tina and Carla for their excellent leadership on this task force, and I have quite a few thank yous. For being the unbelievable leader and reporter for this group. And Barbara, I want to thank you for that we are all holding, wherever we are, our session on native land. I, as many of you know, live in Maine, where that idea is near and dear to my heart, though not near and dear to the hearts of many of my fellow Mainers. So thank you for having us think about that for a minute. So I feel like I'm maybe the emotional commenter for the task force. I start by saying that, like each of my colleagues have said, for me, it has been an opportunity to solidify friendships that I might have had and make new ones, and to feel a true kind of sisterhood as we approach this work. And I feel that with all of the folks on the task force and with the folks who came and spoke to us. So from that, though, I have to say it was both the good, and I don't say the bad, but I do say the hard. So there was the beauty of that sense of sisterhood and commonality with everyone engaged in this effort and the importance of this effort. But for me, I sometimes think I'm the oldest person on the task force, and we never really put our cards down to make sure that's true. But I'm certainly not the youngest. And I started work, I was the second woman to work for the Maine Attorney General's office. That was my first legal job. And I would say that it was a tough row. In many courts, I would be the first woman ever to appear, especially in the rural courts in the state of Maine. And so I experienced all of those things about being invisible, about being told only lawyers are allowed here, all of those things that make each of us feel rejected, ostracized. And since I've begun doing work on implicit bias, I've come to learn that in our brains, we process that kind of rejection and ostracism just the same way, the same part of our brains that process physical pain. So no wonder it is so hard for us. No wonder we have struggled and continue to struggle through so much difficulties. In terms of being accepted as part of a profession, being promoted, as Gloria said, or even understanding how to get promoted, as Gloria said, those are things, not having those things are painful for us. And I acknowledge that pain. And when I went to teaching, I know I have fellow professors on this panel. When I went to teaching, I thought, oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be just great. It's going to be different. And, well, it was different. The work was different. But the reality was not all that different. I tell this story often about a faculty meeting where I left to pick up my son, and know from others telling me afterwards that everyone said, oh, God, she can't possibly make a go of it here. All she has to do is take care of her kids. And I know at the very same faculty, my colleague Dane, whose daughter Catherine was a friend of my son Alex, when Dane went to pick Catherine up, they said, what a great father he is. And the hard part for me is that as I listened to the stories and I heard the talk about the difficulties of motherhood and the difficulties of women who were not in traditional marriages, as Barbara was talking about, They were the same stories. They were the same stories. I could have told those stories. I am telling those stories. I could have told them 20 years ago. I could have told them longer ago. And young women were telling them now. So depressed, yes. I found myself being very depressed. Joyous at the camaraderie and the colleagues and the friends. Depressed at the reality about how little had changed. Depressed also at what I saw going on the national stage for women. And so I sort of was at a crisis point. Isolated as I am now, as we all are through the pandemic more than anything. And I had to have one of those long little chats with myself about, okay, do I give up now? Or am I just going to work harder, harder, harder? And so for me, I made that decision to work harder and harder. And my colleagues on the task force know this, but those of you who are in the audience may not. I'm a new grandmother. My granddaughter, Harriet, had her first birthday just yesterday. And part of that decision for me to work harder and try to bring more equity into our lives and more fairness and more kindness and goodness for women and their success is in love of that baby girl. So I am, however hard I work, nevertheless approaching the end of my career. And I'm leaving my granddaughter in your hands, all of you. And I know you will care for her.
Thank you, Professor Redfield. That was outstanding, and thank you so much. We hope we can carry on the legacy that you've worked through all these years and make a great path for your granddaughter. We now have Judge Langford Morris, who will be discussing her takeaways as well as when she was moderating some panels. Judge Langford Morris.
Okay, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Judge Rachel. And it is truly an honor and a privilege to serve today. Like my co-panelist, I want to give a shout out to our chairs, Tina Luongo and Carla LaRoche, and our reporter, Maryam, who's getting the award on Friday. Congratulations, Maryam. And also, I have to give a big shout out to our big chair, April Phasia Kamara. It truly is an honor to serve on the task force under her new leadership. And we thank the past chairs, Chair Lucian and Chair Kim, for keeping the task force going and initiating it under Lucian's direction. So it is an honor to serve. I did moderate one of our listening sessions, and I guess I want to share that our listening sessions throughout the country, and those that have been mentioned by my co-panelist, were wonderful, in-depth listening sessions that were very intimate. We held them in intimate settings, and I had the pleasure we were in a very close quarters in New York City back in July of 2019, where I moderated a panel of 15 judges. Not all of the judges were there every minute, but some of them were in and out. They were busy. But we had judges from all over the country in New York. We met as a merged group of American Bar Association members and National Bar Association members, which I'm a past chair of the National Bar Association Judicial Council. And so the 15 of us were from the Midwest, the West Coast, Southeast, Northeast, South, urban, rural. All of us were either present judges or had been past judges. Their judges represented the trial courts, juvenile courts, criminal courts, city courts, appellate courts, and both state and federal. And we even had a past bar president, who I won't go into details because it's all secret. And what we say, I won't be identifying what anyone in particular said. But I guess I want to say that all these takeaways that you've heard from my colleagues on this panel are so true. And as women, we share so many things in common. And at this particular session, the majority of the judges were African American judges. Almost all of them were members of the American Bar Association. And we kind of concluded that as judges, we are human beings and we come to the bench with all of our experiences. And many of these judges were open and honest and sharing in this close space their experiences with misogyny and racism before they came to the bench, and yes, after they arrived on the bench. The things that we are studying as a task force do not end with any particular job duties, but rather it's for all of us to try to ensure that we can come up with solutions at the end of our task force that will help women that come after us and beside us. And I can say that as the dean of my bench in 28 years plus and counting. And I've got new Judge Rachel, who's a new judge. And I'm so proud to have the newer judges coming and joining those of us that are older, Professor Sara. So it's an honor to be here. And I just want to share a couple of comments that came from the judges. We had judges that were absolutely incredible, as I've indicated, and they shared so many intimate things. I'm just going to give just very briefly 3 statements. One of the judges said when she was working, she had an attorney that came into her office. This was before she became a judge, and she was the prosecutor. And the lawyer came in, and the first thing the lawyer said after storming into her office was, "Where's the prosecutor?" And she quickly responded, "She'll be right back." And so the lawyer left looking for the prosecutor, and she was the prosecutor. We also had some sharing from judges that talked about how less is more, how their activities and the giving back to the community, and when they are not recognized with the status that they hold as a judge, as a male judge would be recognized, they feel bad. And yet they feel honored to lead as a judge. And many said things that they would stay and continue to work as a judge, even though they had the extra layer of being an African American coupled with being a woman. So that came through loud and clear from many of the representations from the members of the judiciary. And as I indicated, we had really incredible judges, and I want to acknowledge that my co-moderator was the great Bernice Donnell, and everyone knows Judge Donnell. She's a past chair of the criminal justice section. But we heard from many appellate judges, and they said that when they read the transcripts, oftentimes they see that a lawyer was disadvantaged. And there can be something that can be done at that moment if the judge pays attention. And it's very important that an individual recognizes when they enter a courtroom that they are being treated equally. Many of the judges shared that when they practice law, they didn't feel that the judge was giving them an equal status with their opposing counsel, or even that they were not recognized by the male bailiff when they entered the courtroom, and that it makes a huge difference when you're trying to impress your client that you are competent and can represent in the courtroom setting. So we heard just a ton of untold stories from members of the judiciary, and I know it looks like judges have it made, but you can know that judges are the same like practitioners. We are women and we have crosses to bear. So we are all in this together, and it truly is an honor to join in this presentation today, and I look forward to sharing more later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Langford Morris. That was outstanding, and I do appreciate that, the insight that you brought to this panel, to the presentation today about what happened in New York and all those unshared stories. And as a new female judge, I nod my head in recognition of the still small microaggressions that can occur to a female judge. So thank you for that. We do have the award winner for the Reader Tuslet Award. I'm teasing, who will be receiving her award tomorrow. Maryam Ahranjani, if you could follow up, please, with the data, please. And did we lose her? Okay, it looks like we lost Maryam because I don't see her as part of the presenters. All right, and if you know what, she has another. I know she had another panel to present, but I don't see that she's here anymore. Part of this. All right, I'm just looking at the presenters. So maybe she's coming back as viewers, and we'll see if we can get Maryam, Professor Maryam Ahranjani, back here. There she is. There she is. She's coming back. And let's see if we could put the focus on Professor. There you are. Excellent.
Sorry about that. My Wi-Fi connection just decided to go out at exactly the wrong time.
It does that. It instinctively knows, oh, this is a nice time to drop. So you're fine. It was actually, I'm so glad you're back with us. So we're doing excellent on time. And so I wanted to see if you could expound on not only your takeaways, but the surveys and data. Since it's still 3:43 and we do have time. So please, Professor.
Thank you so much. So I'm Maryam Ahranjani. I teach at the University of New Mexico School of Law. And also for almost the past 2 years, I've served as reporter for this amazing task force. And I think something that has been mentioned but is worth mentioning again is the incredible diversity of the members of the task force and the intentionality with which Carla and Tina chose all of the members, including myself as the reporter, with a real effort to choose people with lived experiences that would bring in different perspectives, different voices, for me, this is the first time I've ever been involved professionally in a group that's so intentionally diverse, and it's been for me an amazing opportunity to learn about the importance of recreating this in every space that we possibly can. So I've been listening to all of the comments, and I'm so grateful to see all of the members of this panel today and to hear from everyone. And I don't want to repeat anything that's already been said. So I've been thinking about what I could contribute. One thing I want to do is connect a link between the keynote speaker for today, Professor Carlton Waterhouse, who spoke just before this session. And he talked about the role of social dominance in criminal justice reform, that without acknowledging the ways in which systems work to keep certain people in certain places, we won't ever have meaningful reform. And as he was speaking more intentionally about racial justice in the criminal justice system and having more equal treatment and equal outcomes for criminal defendants in particular, and the ways in which police officers are held accountable and other actors in the system are held accountable. But I was thinking as he was speaking how this role of social dominance extends to our work on the task force, and how there's a gender dominance in the law and in many professions, but in particular, I think this task force has exposed a number of ways in which, sadly, as Professor Redfield mentioned earlier, we continue to experience the same struggles that our sisters, our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers experienced, and in some ways that is incredibly disappointing. It has been incredibly disappointing to hear. But I think with this framework of thinking about how the system is set up to make these phenomena reoccur, we can hopefully think about how to dismantle a system that doesn't work for everyone. It works for men. It has worked for white men in particular, since we've had a criminal legal system in the United States. But a lot of the things that we heard from women in our task force listening sessions, as well, which you've heard about from some of the co-panelists, as well as what I've heard in the data gathering that I've done, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, are just clearly expose the need for, as Professor Creel mentioned, flexibility in the workplace that allows for people to care for their children. And it's not just women that are doing that. Those responsibilities still fall more heavily on women than they do on men. But the idea of not creating a responsive workplace that allows people to be the very best workers they can be, but also to keep their children alive, right? And to keep their family members they're caring for alive. It's simply missing the mark. It's missing the mark if we want more representation in the profession. So I thought that was a useful thing for us to think about, what Professor Waterhouse was saying in terms of social dominance in this context of women in criminal justice, right? If we're really serious about dismantling some of the challenges that the women face, we've got to talk about systemic reform. And that's what this task force, I think many of us wanted to go straight to the systemic reform, frankly, when we started. But we really do want to document, the challenges. And so our first phase has been hearing from women directly, giving them the space, the voice, the empowerment to articulate the challenges that they face, and to be heard, to be able to feel validated, and for all of us to sit in those feelings for a little bit. That was really the first phase, and that phase included gathering data, really qualitative data from the women who testified before us. And we have about 160 women from the various listening sessions that we heard from. And we are just now wrapping up a follow-up survey to all of those women, thanks to the tremendous help of the ABA Center for Innovation, and in particular, Sara Glassmeyer, who is a project manager there. Sara has helped us to sort of tweak a survey that we gave to women before they testified before us, to help them prepare for their presentations in terms of what we were looking for, which is, of course, what are the challenges in hiring, retention, and promotion of women in criminal justice. So we've administered that follow-up survey. It includes a whole section on COVID and the ways in which COVID has affected their ability to work and be the kind of excellent criminal justice practitioners that they want to be. And so we're really eager to see that information. We so far have about a third of the women who have been approached have responded already with fantastic feedback and ideas. And I will be reaching out to all the rest of them we're trying to get as close to 100% participation as possible, even recognizing, though, the importance of giving people space. I mean, when we first, by the way, sent out that follow-up survey, immediately got several out-of-office replies from women who said very explicitly in their out-of-office replies, I am engaged in caregiving during the COVID-19 era, and so I'm on a part-time schedule or flex time schedule, or I'm on temporary leave. And so those for me were like immediate reminders of the challenges where many of us are facing at this particular moment in time, which is an important time for the task force. So in terms of the next steps, we're going to be doing quantitative data gathering. We need to, as a task force, we've been on hold a little bit, in the last few months. But we look forward to regrouping soon and talking about how do we administer a survey to women in 2 or hopefully more states to gather more extensive data about what their challenges are and what recommendations they have for improvement. So I'm leading that effort with Yamini Rao, who's a member of our advisory board. She also is a woman who one of many who in this process of reaching out to women across the country have asked, how can I help? How can I join in this effort? She is a deputy public defender in Santa Clara County, California, and we invited her to join our advisory board because of her tremendous work in preparing for her own testimony in San Francisco. Anyway, the two of us are co-chairing our data committee. We look forward to the next steps. I'm happy to answer any questions about the task force's work in the past or moving forward. And I'll just leave it at that. So we have a little bit of time for any follow-up questions, Judge Pickering, you may have, or others in the audience.
What we're going to do is, it is 3:52. We have time for questions. We do have some, so if we have questions, and that could, this would be the time. We do have, and the questions, just to let us know, the questions would come through questions up on your right side. Is that correct? That I believe that they can send questions to? Because we don't have polls, so there is a portion where you can send questions. And I don't see that. I don't see any questions yet. And I want to make sure that we get them in if we do see them. What I would like is, hold on just a second. Let's see. Okay. And let's see if we can get any. And I don't see if there's questions out there. What I could do, if you don't mind, since and just to let us know if the questions can be done through the chat. You could put your questions through there up on the right corner. We have had some nice comments to the side. We also will take compliments too. But if there's questions that you have, you could put that in the chat for us.
Judge Pickering, while we're waiting for some questions, Major Upward wasn't able to join us this afternoon because she had an emergency that came up, a personal emergency. But one thing that she was going to cover was talking about, because she's in the military, so she's a major in the Marine Corps, and the task force has really been trying to be inclusive of women that are outside the traditional roles of criminal justice but are still working in criminal justice. And she was going to represent that perspective of being a Marine Corps attorney. Maybe you could speak a little bit upon some of the ongoing work that we're going to be doing, and including women that are working in policy or in other areas of criminal justice that are not just the traditional ones we think about.
Right. So in terms of, hold on, I think there's some feedback. That is definitely something. Thank you, Gloria. That is something that the Women in Criminal Justice Task Force is going to be doing. We're looking beyond the expanding role of that. I think we have something. Let me check. We could talk about next steps. That's something that we can talk about. I think the next steps, and Maryam, you talked about, Professor Maryam, you talked about the next steps about the data selecting. We also, the next steps is going to be, we have broken up into committees, different committees, a strategy committee, a work product committee, a policy committee, and the point is recruitment, continuing on with retention, keeping women in criminal justice. If I could just give one perspective, give me just a second. One perspective that I want to talk about while we're waiting for, okay. While we're waiting for questions, if there are any, is to be on a task force. If I could just talk about this real quick, to be on this task force and to hear from those who are speaking, and I don't know if he wants to put the camera on. on how he wants to set up the camera right now. Okay. Maryam, did you have any question? Did you want to add anything further about next steps?
Well, it's sort of nitty gritty, but the task force will be reconvening. We need to really think about the survey data that we want to collect and how to do that in a way that's thoughtful and careful. There really isn't data that we're creating our own data sets. There's no sort of collection of the kind of information that we think we need. And that's a very big undertaking. We also know that we have some work product ideas that are, probably likely to move forward regardless of the data that we gather, because we know, for example, one of the things we keep hearing is the value and importance of mentorship. And Professor Creel mentioned earlier that, the like feeling connected to the work and how important that is. And that is so important to the women we've worked with. But so many, I'm thinking about the women in Spokane and some of the other places who talked about really not knowing what resources were available to them in terms of getting advice for how to stick around, how to make it work. Are there other spaces for me that might be a better fit? And so we really think the ABA could play a huge role in promoting and making more connections in terms of mentorship. I did want to mention that. And I have to say, I'm so sorry, Judge Pickering.
You're going to go.
I'm on another panel right after this. So
okay.
I'm going to pop out into that one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye, Mary.
Bye, Maryam. See you tomorrow.
If I could just thank you very much. I think we're almost done. I think I have just a second more. There is definitely going to be work being done on what we all heard, the impact that it made on this task force. We cannot close our eyes. We cannot, put our hands over our ears and pretend like we didn't hear what we heard. I think it's excellent what Maryam talked about, the social dominance, because we're seeing it on so many different levels, the different pressure points that women feel from office staff, colleagues, opposing counsel, clients and their families, victims, court staff, supervisors, jurors. There's just so many different ways that women have obstacles. And so what we're trying to do is put steps forward to encourage those obstacles to lessen. And one thing I could do as a judge is, and that's just one thing I'll be talking about, is flexibility that judges need to have for women practitioners at this time during the pandemic, especially on Zoom calls. Be understanding when they call in from their car. Be understanding if we have people who their screen is blocked because their kids are in the background, or they'll mute themselves a lot because the children are in the background. So the stress, one point thing is to just stress from those in the court system of the understanding that we need right now in COVID. But there's a lot to be done, and I just want to end with that. I want to thank the panel so much for my countless emails getting us here. It is 3:59. I know we have to get to the next presentation, but I just want to thank all for being part of this presentation. I want to thank the past criminal justice section leaders for putting the task force together, for Kim Parker for nominating me to this spot. I've gotten so much for this, and that's our former chair, Kim Parker, who helped us get through the COVID pandemic and beginning of the year, and all the future leaders forward. And I also want to thank this panel for your thoughts, your contributions, and your future thoughts and contributions. These are amazing women. I made a point to spend a bit of time at the beginning just to hear their bios, just so you could see all that they're doing, what they've done, and hopefully what we can achieve forward. So Tina, as co-chair, did you want to end with any optimistic words?
Here's what we say about our task force, and I'll leave it at that. That this task force is certainly going to be tasked with keeping the connections we made across this country. That is really the number one priority. So keep looking out. We'll be around. And thank you very much, Judge Pickering,
Oh, you're welcome.
for working us through right on time.
All right.
And I miss you all.
Okay. Thank you very much. Goodbye, all.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Take care. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Judge Langford Morris.
Thank you, Judge. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Gloria.